Okay, so sometimes you just hear a news story and you think, whoa, things are about to change.
Yeah, like a real watershed moment.
Exactly. And the BBC News is reporting on what might be one of those moments.
Big changes in global trade, maybe.
Huge changes potentially. And it all stems from President Trump's recent announcement about new tariffs on goods coming into America
A lot of tariffs on goods from pretty much everywhere.
from almost everywhere. Yeah. So we're going to do a deep dive today into these tariffs, what they mean, and how other countries are reacting to them.
What they could mean for the future, even.
Exactly. So we'll be looking at all the details from this BBC News report.
So we're all on the same page.
Exactly. And what we really want to do is make this news easy to understand. We want to cut through the economic jargon and get to the heart of what's going on.
So everyone listening can understand what's happening and why it matters.
Right. So the BBC report kicks off with President Trump making this announcement in the Rose Garden at the White House.
Setting the scene.
Yeah, and his language was really strong. He called it America's Liberation Day. I know, right? He even compared these tariffs to something we haven't seen since World War II.
Like a major economic shift.
Exactly. He's saying it's about economic independence.
So right away, it seems like this is more than just some minor adjustments to trade deals. It feels like a whole new approach.
Absolutely. And the tariffs themselves are pretty sweeping. The baseline is a 10% tariff on almost all goods being imported into the U.S.
From every country.
Every single country, yeah, including the U.K.
Mm-hmm.
And this is set to start this Saturday.
So just a few days from now, a flat 10% added to the price of all sorts of products entering the U.S. It's a big move.
It is. But then the BBC report gets into these even bigger tariffs, what they're calling punitive tariffs.
Oh, yeah, these are a lot higher.
Way higher. They go up to 50%, and they're aimed at about 60 countries that the U.S. considers the worst offenders when it comes to trade imbalances.
So they're saying these countries haven't been trading fairly,
Exactly.
and they're being punished, basically.
Right. And the BBC report actually lists some specific examples of these higher tariffs. So for goods coming from China, there's a 34% tariff.
That's significant.
Yeah, and the European Union gets hit with a 20% tariff. And then, get this, countries like Myanmar, Laos, and Bangladesh are looking at a 37% tariff.
Wow, those numbers really jump out. It shows how targeted these higher tariffs are.
Right, it's not just a blanket increase for everyone. It's very strategic.
Aimed at specific countries and their trading practices.
Now let's talk about cars, because there's a separate 25% tariff on all foreign-made cars coming into the U.S.
All cars.
All of them. And this one starts at midnight U.S. time tonight. And here's the thing, there's no exception for the U.K. on this one.
The car industry is massive globally, so this could have some pretty big ripple effects.
Yeah, it could affect how much we all pay for cars and also which car companies are the most competitive.
A lot of uncertainty there.
Definitely. Now, President Trump has been making some big claims about how much money these tariffs are going to generate. He's talking about hundreds of billions of dollars a year.
That's a lot of money.
It is. He's even saying $6 trillion over a decade. And his whole goal here is to make America wealthy again.
It sounds ambitious, but I wonder how realistic those numbers are. It's not as simple as just imposing tariffs and watching the money roll in.
That's true. Businesses might change how they operate or find ways around these tariffs.
And other countries could retaliate with tariffs of their own.
Absolutely. And that actually leads us to something Trump kept repeating, which is this phrase, reciprocal tariffs.
What does that even mean?
Well, his explanation was, they do it to us and we do it to them. Very simple.
Okay, but the BBC report suggests it's actually a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah, reciprocal in this case doesn't just mean matching the exact percentage of tariffs that other countries have on American goods. It's about the overall picture.
The big picture.
Right. The U.S. is looking at what they call the totality of tariffs American businesses face when they try to sell their products abroad.
So it's not just about those direct taxes, the tariffs themselves.
It's also about things like needing special import licenses or navigating complex regulations.
Things that make it harder for U.S. companies to compete.
Exactly. And they're even factoring in things like accusations of currency manipulation or intellectual property theft.
So it's a much broader assessment of the challenges U.S. businesses face in the global market.
And the BBC report gives some examples to illustrate this. For instance, they say U.S. goods face a 97% totality of tariffs when they try to enter Cambodia's market.
97%.
Wow. Yeah, and that's why the U.S. is now slapping a 49% tariff on goods coming in from Cambodia.
So they're trying to even the playing field in a way.
Exactly. And then for the EU, they calculated it at 39%, which explains the new 20% U.S. tariff on EU goods.
It's like they're saying, If you're going to make it this hard for us to sell our stuff there, then we're going to make it harder for you to sell your stuff here.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Now, where does the UK stand in all of this? Well, the BBC report says the UK is facing that initial 10% tariff on all the goods it sends to the US.
So not the higher targeted tariffs, but still a significant cost for UK businesses.
Right, it's going to add up. And there's this interesting little detail in the BBC report. They mentioned that during the announcement, President Trump actually held up a rectangular piece of cardboard and called it a tariff.
A piece of cardboard.
It sounds like a prop, almost like he was trying to make a visual point.
Interesting. So what's been the reaction to all of this? I mean, these tariffs are pretty big news.
Yeah, the BBC report says there's a lot of fear about a potential global trade war.
Which could lead to a global recession.
Exactly. It's a real concern. And of course, the global economy is so interconnected these days.
When a country as big as the U.S. makes a move like this, it affects everyone.
Right. So what about the UK specifically? How are they reacting?
Well, the BBC's political editor, Chris Mason, says the initial mood in the UK government was pretty somber.
Not surprising.
No, but he also said there was a sense of relief that the 10% tariff for the UK wasn't higher than it was.
So like they were bracing for worse news?
Kind of, yeah. Then we have a statement from the UK Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds.
What did he have to say? He emphasized that the UK government's priority is always to act in the best interests of UK businesses and consumers. And he said they're still in talks with the US about a limited trade deal.
With the hope that this could reduce or eliminate these tariffs.
Exactly. But he also used the phrase, nothing is off the table, which suggests they're prepared to take other actions if needed.
So they're willing to negotiate, but they're also ready to stand their ground.
Yeah. Now, the BBC's economic editor, Faisal Islam, had some really interesting insights. He called this an extraordinary move by President Trump, even though some people had predicted tariffs might be coming.
What else did he say?
Well, he pointed out that even that baseline 10% tariff is going to add up to a lot of money over the next 10 years.
Especially when you consider how much the UK trades with the US.
Right. And he actually estimated that these tariffs could add an extra 6 to 7 billion pounds in costs for the UK economy.
It's a big number.
It is. And he particularly highlighted the impact this will have on UK car exports.
Which, as we said, is a huge global industry.
Exactly. Now, remember that piece of cardboard Trump was holding up?
Yeah, what was that all about?
Well, Faisal Islam suggested that it was a list of all the things the U.S. sees as unfair trade practices by other countries.
Not just tariffs, but all sorts of things.
Right. And what's really interesting is that Trump implied he's only responding with about half the level of perceived unfairness.
So there's room for these tariffs to go even higher.
Exactly. It's like a warning shot.
Like he's saying, we could do more, but we're watching you.
Right now, another point Faisal made was about the potential for trade distortions.
What does that mean?
Well, for example, the UK now has a 10% tariff on its goods entering the US, while the EU has a 20% tariff.
So that creates an uneven playing field.
Exactly. And that could influence business decisions about where to operate and where to get their products from.
Decisions that wouldn't be based on what's most efficient, but on who's getting hit with the highest tariffs.
Right. It could distort the natural flow of trade.
And lead to all sorts of unpredictable consequences.
Absolutely. And Faisal Islam summed it all up by saying that this has the potential to reshape the geography of economics.
Wow, that's a big statement.
It is. He's saying that this could fundamentally change where goods are produced, how supply chains work, and even the basic patterns of global trade.
The whole system could be upended.
Possibly. So let's recap. President Trump has announced these huge tariffs on goods coming into the U.S. with a 10% base rate for most countries, including the U.K., and then higher tariffs for specific countries based on what the U.S. sees as unfair trade practices.
And his justification for all of this is to promote reciprocal tariffs and ultimately to boost the American economy.
The initial reaction, especially from the UK, has been a mix of worry and a bit of relief that the tariffs weren't worse. And the UI government is saying they're committed to protecting UK interests while also negotiating with the US.
But the economic experts are warning that this could be a really transformative event with a real risk of economic disruption and big changes to global trade.
Yeah, it feels like we're at a turning point. So this is something to watch closely, I think. And it makes you wonder, what are the ripple effects of these tariffs that we might not see right away? What are the hidden consequences that will play out over time?
And how will this affect how countries cooperate or don't cooperate on trade in the future? These are big questions with no easy answers.
Exactly. Food for thought.
Absolutely.